Hello, science friends! We are in our last week, week 8 of science, and we are learning about animal behaviors. Now, let's talk about behaviors to start with. We all know what behaviors are. It's the things that we do because of a stimulus or something that happened. It's a cause and effects approach. Behaviors are something you can see. It's not something where you just feel. It's something you can see and it's observable. We've talked about that in our science experiments. We always say, what do you see? This is animal behaviors. Because I don't have any animals with me, a lot of our animals died. I think the only things that are still living are earthworms. I won't be able to show you guys the animals today, so we'll just go through these slides and we'll talk about their adaptations. Let's start off with how do animals cope with changes in their environment? Well, they cope by responding to the stimuli, or whatever the condition is. We call it a condition in science. We also call it a stimuli in science. So let's think about how animals respond to temperature changes. We know that in Florida, we saw the video right before we left, of chameleons suddenly just falling off trees. Why are they falling off trees? Because they're not warm-blooded. Their blood actually slows down because of the stimuli that's around them. It gets cold, so they just kind of drop dead because they start hibernating. That's a behavior that they use. When we change in temperature, other animals shed, like your dogs, like your cats, like snakes. They shed. To maintain their internal temperature, animals who form really thick coats of fur or feathers to insulate their body from the cold weather actually shed their fur or their feathers. Not all of them, just enough to keep them cool during the hot weather. The animal sheds their covering to provide a cooling effect. Sometimes when there's changes in temperature, us as human beings, and sometimes even dogs, sometimes cats, they sweat. That's why, sometimes we might smell gross when we sweat, but that's because of the stuff that we ingest inside our bodies. But sweating is basically water going onto your skin so that it evaporates the surface of the skin to cool down the animal. And yes, we are animals. What? Changes in temperature also help. A way to also help is panting. We don't pant, although whenever some of us run, like myself, I tend to pant a lot. I breathe hard because it's hot and it's hard to breathe, and sometimes I can't take it, y'all. But animals, they pant to get rid of excess heat. They pant through their mouth. You see dogs do it all the time. Sometimes you see tigers do it. Most of the times you see dogs do it. Sometimes you might even see turtles do it. I'll tell you a story. When I was younger, I don't know if I was supposed to wash turtles, but I did. And when I did, I washed them in cold water, and then I saw that it wasn't swimming very well, so I washed it in hot water. After a while, the turtle just stopped moving. Well, his mouth was open. He was panting. He wasn't dead. He was just panting because it was really hot. I didn't know that I was almost making turtle soup, but we were panting, guys. Anyways, when animals pant, they increase the airflow and cause the increase in the evaporation from the animal's mouth and lungs. That cools down the animal. And that is how they change in temperature. And another way is shivering. So when it's cold outside, these are all behaviors. When it's cold outside, what do? It's freezing cold. There's goose chicken bumps all over our arms. Our hair sticks up. Why does that happen? Because it's a response. It's a behavior. So behaviors aren't just, something bad that you do someday and then choices you make another day. It's the innate ability in a creature to do something. So the animals respond to cold temperatures by shaking, shivering. It's all a response to the stimulus. And what is that stimulus? It's heat. Sometimes it's an involuntary response to drop the temperature down in our body, like shivering, like shaking, like chattering our teeth. And other times it's using the energy to help us transform that into heat. Remember back in our unit at the beginning of the year when we talked about how little molecules move, and when those little molecules move and they collide with each other, that creates heat transfer. So when that occurs, you're able to, that's why we shiver. The molecules in our body need to move a lot faster. Sometimes we rub our hands together. Remember when we talked about that during our energy unit? We rub our hands together to create energy. That's what we use in order to help us bring down or bring up the temperature in our body if it's too cold. Another stimuli is looking at environment stimuli. Sometimes when stuff gets into our eyes, we just start blinking. We blink because we're trying to get the dirt out of our eyes. That's kind of automatic. There's involuntary, automatic, those are the same things. You do it without voluntarily doing it. Sometimes when it's cold outside, we shake, when we jump up and down in order to bring up the heat in our body. Sometimes we can't do that, we don't do that, and like something gets in our eye, we automatically just blink to try to get it out of the way. Our tear ducts start tearing up. That's an automatic response to protect your eyes by covering it with film to protect it against your body, to protect it against any foreign objects like dirt, little mites, anything like that. It helps from drying the eyes out and causing any infection in your eyes. Another stimulus that we talk about is a response to what animals do when it gets cold outside. They respond by hibernating. When they hibernate, it's because it's cold outside. Okay, sometimes when it's cold outside here down in South Carolina, old people go inside and hibernate. Okay, it's a response. Their blood is not as thin as younger blood, so they get cold very easily. If you go to grandmother's house, oftentimes you might find that their temperature is a lot higher than yours at home because they're just naturally a lot colder, so they need the heat. That's why a lot of people retire down south because it's always warmer down south. As a result, so let's talk about animals. As a result, because of the cold, the animals hibernate. Hibernation is the state of highly reduced body activity, okay? So technically, they're just migrating like birds do, migrate down south. Animals like bears, sometimes moles, squirrels, hibernate and reduce their body temperature so that they can conserve food and store it in their body. Oftentimes during the fall and into the winter, plants tend to die, or they tend to just lose their leaves, and they're still alive, but they're just not producing fruit and food for animals to eat. So then that's a scarcity for the animals, so they learn to adapt by hibernation. The animal's body temperature drops, their heartbeat and their breathing slows down, and it uses very little bit of energy in order to even live. Some examples: ants hibernate. If you guys ever see down south here, I know some of you are brand new down here, but if some of you guys have seen, whenever it gets cold outside, you start seeing ant mounds shoot out all over the place. All over your house, all over like the road, like along the sides of the parks and stuff like that. It's because the ants can't handle the cold ground, so they need to push that dirt back up and make a mound so that it's closer to the sun technically, so that they can absorb that sun, so that it's warmer for them to work. Those mounds help them to be able to get sunlight and get energy. Black bears, beavers, ground squirrels, they try to hoard their food. They try to gather their food, and some squirrels hide their nuts, you know, so that they're able to be dormant throughout the wintertime. That picture right there is a hazel dormouse. They are hibernating in a burrow. During this time, we talked about migration as well. Monarch butterflies, orcas, caribou. It's not just birds. They're mammals in the ocean as well that migrate, and they usually migrate to the same route every year. Recently, there has been some changes because of seasonal effects. The waters sometimes get warmer, so they might be able to migrate more. But that's like no different from any other time in the entire time of animals living that it changes. Sometimes they'll just take different routes because there's more plentiful food in a different location than they usually go. But then they usually they usually go back to where they usually are the following year. Here's a picture of migrating snow geese in Texas. They migrate in groups, really big groups, because it, one, protects them, and two, helps with their aviation. It cuts back on the force that it takes for them to fly alone, and it takes a lot less energy, and when they fly in packs or in flocks, they're able to cut down the aerodynamic and help them get to where they need to a lot faster and a lot safer. Some behavioral responses include responses for defense. It's not just temperature. Animals use camouflage in order to help them protect themselves and in order to survive. So us silver foxes, that's technically not a silver fox, but the silver foxes are a dark color because we hide in the background a lot easier, and it's a lot easier to find animals that way to eat and hunt. Arctic foxes are white, and then we know red foxes. Those are like the typical ones that we use. Some other defenses include smells. So if you've ever come across a skunk, I feel so sorry for you. But some skunks use this smell to prevent the predator from actually eating them. So the skunks spray a musk that helps issue protection around them. It's a very advertent smell, and if you have not ever smelled it, good for you. Another defense that animals use, this is our insects. We know that bees and wasps use stingers, and it's usually because of fear. It's not because they hate you. It's not because they attack, they just want you to get out of here, and that is it. They don't want to get hurt. They don't want you to kill them. They use it so that they're able to protect themselves. And usually they're really, they don't have brains like we do. As soon as they see anything else come towards them that's big, they're gonna hit them. That's why I say when we were looking at our Madagascar cockroaches, they're more afraid of you than you are of them, because their stimulus is the fear, but their response is to hiss. They don't bite, they don't do anything else, but the hissing scares people off, kind of like rattlesnakes. You know a rattlesnake is going to attack you when their tail starts to rattle. It's like your warning. These animals do the same thing. They do it out of fear because they're scared you're gonna hurt them. It's not because they're mean and vicious. They're just trying to protect themselves. So keep that in mind when you guys are thinking about animals and their defenses. Another defense that we see is ejection. Squids do ink clouds. They eject black ink clouds to give them a chance to escape from their predator. It's kind of like a smoke screen. Some lizards will shoot blood from their eyes to make it think, just to confuse their predator, as you see in the picture there. Some animals do mimicry. a lot of butterflies, a lot of um,